You're watching TelecomTV from the MEF16 event in Baltimore. And I'm joined now by Joe Cumello, who is VP of Portfolio Marketing at Ciena. Joe, thanks for joining us on TelecomTV.
Happy to be here.
How do we as an industry go about combining these enabling technologies, SDN, NFV, orchestration, to really further telco transformation?
It's a good question because I think the industry has been struggling with, which use cases are most important, how are they going to drive revenue, and I think that what we're finding as a company, considering we've got some large public deployments with folks like Orange and CenturyLink, that ultimately the best case scenario for our customers is actually to identify very specifically a use case that works for them, something simple to tackle first. Understand how that might work, how it might change operations, how it might change the back office, what personnel issues that might, what people have to be trained on and learn. And once you're successful doing that, then it can expand into other areas. But in an orchestration platform, especially something like Blue Planet, which is multi-domain by design, it can do orchestration, it can do NFV orchestration, it can do automation. You really want to tackle that first use case and then grow from there. And we find that customers are comfortable with that model ultimately because it allows them to start small and then grow from there. And that's how the transformation seems to germinate.
So the MEF has been doing a lot of work on lifecycle services orchestration, LSO. What are we seeing at the moment in the market regards the development of LSO and its uptake by providers?
Sure, well I think that LSO, as defined by the MEF, is real important to the industry, obviously. It sets specific parameters about how this should be done by companies. We, as an orchestration vendor ourselves, we basically look, as I said, on the use case of the customer and say, okay, how do you want to do orchestration? How is it going to be best for your organization? How should it best be deployed by you and by your people? And then build off that from them. If they are more interested in sort of service assurance or NFV orchestration or analytics or policy, all those things can be implemented. I think all how we're developing this as an industry is a little bit organic right now, but LSO's leadership, MEF's leadership in that has certainly been instrumental in moving the ball forward for everybody. So absolutely positive on that and glad to see it's still moving forward.
Now, one of the themes that we're picking up here at the MEF16 event is openness and open networking. Yeah. Given the reality of the telecoms business, what's the balance between open networking and closed, more proprietary systems? Because it's got to be a mix, hasn't it?
Yeah, it is a mix. I think ultimately what people want is not to be locked in any longer. And this concept of vendor lock-in is frustrating for our customers on a global basis because it reduces their agility as companies. So any means that we can as a company, not just us but a whole industry, to sort of allow for vendors to work together, to allow interfaces to talk to each other is critical. Now, there's a natural tension in the system because we haven't operated like this as a business for 30 some years. So there could be organizational resistance, there's lots of things sort of in the way of making that happen. But the thing that's different this time than versus the last 30 years, if you look at it in general, is that this is now being driven by almost as a service provider mandate. And that makes it much more powerful. So if you had to rely only on the vendors in the past, you'd say to yourself, okay, hey, you guys want to be open or can you work together? And if you left it up to the vendors, they'd say, maybe not. Well, you know what, it's not really a choice anymore. So we have to go figure it out as an industry. As a company, Ciena has embraced this concept. We have open interfaces on our products. We have APIs allowing other systems to talk to our products. Our software is open. It's built on open source software. So we're very comfortable with where the industry is going there. But yes, there is a natural tension in the system here. Yeah.
And does more have to be done to promote open networking? And I guess at the same time, you talked about vendor lock-in. Yeah. Is there a danger that if you've got a lot of different open systems, you get kind of default lock-in through openness as well?
Yeah, right, that's an interesting point. I think what happens is there's sort of voting by, let's call it voting by the pocketbook. And ultimately, if you look at what's happened with Linux and other pieces of open source software, you'll find that typically people don't download the software and say, okay, I'm just going to use this in its natural form. What they say is, I'm going to need some systems integration, I'm going to need some things around this to make it work, and they'll work with Red Hat, let's say, or even on OpenStack, it could be Mirantis. My point is that generally there's a commercial element to open source. And people select their open source technology usually ultimately by pocketbook, not just by pocketbook, by deployment. And so we have a ton of open source initiatives in the industry. Actually, many argue maybe too many. And ultimately what's going to happen is that some will be selected ultimately because of deployment, and that deployment will rule at the end of the day as to what gets done. So exciting to see how this develops for us, and I guess we'll take it one day at a time.
Can I just move on and touch on optical networking, what's happening there? Because we're just suddenly seeing some quite surprising announcements, 400 gig trials that might happen in the US next year. Yeah. What do you think that impact's going to have on the business as a whole?
Yeah, well, it's an exciting time for us related to 400 gig in the industry. Obviously we're moving, there's a paradigm shift from 100 and 200 gig to 400 gig. And with the amount of content we're driving from our own devices, all of a sudden, Facebook Live and virtual reality and augmented reality technology, we're obviously going to need it as an industry. We recently announced our WaveLogic AI next generation chipset, which drives 400 gig on a single carrier, so very excited about that. And ultimately, it's a requirement in the network. But beyond just raw capacity, which I think is important to service providers, we're actually getting the request now for, you've got to drive raw capacity, you've got to drive better density, you got to lower the power, it's got to be better from a cost per bit standpoint. But we're hearing something else too, which I think is important, which is also give me, serve me up information from this network, automation, intelligence, metrics, so that I can actually make choices, automation choices off of this optical network. And so I don't think that the currency anymore is just capacity like 400 gig. I think that's critical, but I think that the actual thing that's starting to happen is it's this capacity plus metrics and automation and intelligence that will ultimately be the currency in the networks.
Can I ask a final question then?
Yeah, sure.
And looking at the work the MEF is doing, what is it about the MEF and its work that is applicable and attractive to Ciena?
I mean, I think you can look at the proof of concept, what's going on downstairs here at the show, as a clear example of what's powerful about this organization, because they have set up an environment for all of us as a community, and by the way, not just vendors, it's vendors in partnership with their customers, to actually show technology in action, whether it's LSO, whether it's carrier Ethernet, whether it's some kind of MEF 2.0 service. All of these things are amazingly valuable to show in real time and show that they're working. Because we can hem and haw all day and puff out our chests about on a marketing basis and make claims all day long, but once you can actually go see something working, then you've moved the industry forward, and I think that's what we're seeing here at the show.
Great. Well, Joe, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, appreciate it.